Marilyn Manson has always been a very articulate person, almost articulate. And in this video we are going to study a conversation where he was being attacked and challenged on some of his views on religion and also sexuality. I had made a video about that in the past, but it was only short clips of him, and this one we are going to study the whole conversation and see what you could do if you were being attacked in a similar situation to defend yourself verbally without losing your cool. We are going to use the magical linguistics model to elaborate on what is happening in this conversation, which is just my version of a sleight of mouth. And I would like you to pay attention to how detached emotionally Marilyn Manson is during that argument, debate. Maybe because he's just a laid-back person in general, or maybe because of the amount of drugs processing in his digestive system at this moment. Who knows? Whatever the reason is, let's proceed with the conversation.
Don't Christian groups need somebody to protest against? Isn't there a symbiotic relationship between whoever they're against, be it you or the gays or whatever, abortion clinics? Don't they need each other?
Or Kathy Lee Gifford, you know.
There's an old saying that the devil has always been the church's best friend because he's kept them in business. And I think,
yeah,
like you're saying, they've picked me to be that. But I don't mind the protesting. I just wish that they would get the facts straight because they think that I do a lot of things. But I'm really about individuality, and that's really the bottom line.
I think you guys have it totally backward. You guys have it totally backward. You're saying that the church needs people like Marilyn and other people to stay in business when actually Marilyn wouldn't even exist.
Manson.
Well, Brian, if we really want to get real here, because that's his real name, that's what his mama named him. But the point is that his album is called
Clay,
Anti-Christ. But he would respond. But you know what? Even the name of his album, Anti-Christ Superstar. If there was no Christ, there would, Christ he needs Christ to stay in business. Because if he's trying to push the envelope against home. And that's the whole point. I think that when people are talking about
they show up, really a
they show up,
there.
yeah,
Exactly.
But they show up at these concerts and they protest. I think it's a sad commentary when we have put it on the slate that only the Christian right thinks that there's something wrong here. I don't know.
Now, there are rumors about what you do, and then there's the reality of what you do.
The first smart thing Marilyn Manson is doing here is using an analogy. The devil has always been the church's best friend. He's kept them in business. That has some humor behind it, obviously. It is not meant to be taken literally. He's just following the trail of the conversation. However, when she is starting to call him Brian, this is his mom's name from what she says, what this technique is basically infantilizing your interlocutor, which is, in my perspective, kind of rude at this point of the conversation, because so far I did not hear anything where he has been disrespecting her. So her using that right off the bat, whereas she obviously considers herself the most moral person in that argument, I don't see that as being such a nice and polite way of communicating. Then she's putting to an alternative view, putting back the views at him, saying that, well, if Christ did not exist, you would be out of business, basically. That is, in the most childish way of explaining that is the language pattern. It is not me, it is you. More elaborate here based on what she said, but it is basically the idea, just using one thing and applying it back into the alternative view at the person who said it. Why not, but not much of a smart move in my opinion either.
There are, for example, you do rip pages out of the Bible in your concert. You do wipe your ass with the American flag. Some of these things, you have to admit, are controversial.
Absolutely.
I mean,
they're designed to make people think, but the point with a Bible or a flag is to say, it's only as valid as you make it in your heart. A piece of paper. It's all about
perception, isn't it, Marilyn?
A piece of paper or a piece of cloth doesn't mean anything. It's what you believe. And I want people to think about what they believe. I want them to consider if everything they've been taught, if that's what they want to believe or that's what they've been told that they have to believe.
But I agree with that. In a sense.
Right here, Manson is being challenged by the host on a pretty normal concern that may arise with his behaviors and messages on stage, implying that it can be misinterpreted depending on who is watching and how they are watching. And what he is doing, instead of being in confrontation, he is redirecting to his back intention, explaining that his deeper intention is to make people consider if what they believe is really what they want to believe, or if they just believe that because they have been taught they should believe it.
I do agree with that point in the sense that I have more respect, and some people, you hear me out when you hear this, so I have more respect for this young man than I have for the majority of people in this country. Because 86% of Americans claim to be Christian, Judeo-Christian, whatever else, and they're not. They're hypocrites. But the point is that when I see this young man, you know, it does draw a line in the standard. We need to realize we are in a cultural war, and everyone wants to straddle the fence. Either you are Antichrist or you are Christ. It's as simple as that. Either there are standards or they're not.
In us?
I don't. No, I don't. I don't wipe my rear end with the American flag.
Well, I think if parents spent more time trying to censor rock music and art and movies and things like that, and they spent the time teaching their kids to appreciate and understand those things, and to know what's right and what's wrong, I think that's more time spent, more valuable.
It's less about Marilyn, but more about the hundreds of thousands of young people. What motivates them to go out, not just him, but you know, Ozzy Osbourne in the 70s, he was real big. What motivates them to go out and buy a quote-unquote, you know, so-called demon-possessed young man's album?
But Lakia, more importantly, what possesses him to go out on stage?
No, but see, that's the whole thing. If there were no crowd, if there was no market, you know, he would be out of business. If there weren't people buying his records, making it platinum, and we have to see what's in the psyche of America.
Jordan wants to break in, so to speak.
Right here we are getting at the core of the argument, I would say, and she's explaining that in her worldview, the behaviors of Manson and probably other musicians like him or artists like him are propagating cultural war because of their messages, because of the views they propel in their text, in their lyrics. This is all pretty negative in her map of the world. And he's at first, maybe not the best move, but why not? He's at first appealing to a future outcome, trying to distance a little bit from the infuriated argument or like the emotional baggage she may have in this conversation. He's taking some distance from that by saying, well, if parents in the future, or like at least from right now, were starting to educate their child more on what is right and what is wrong, instead of battling and trying to condemn and censor rock music, we would be in better terms anyway. And she is obviously not accepting or tolerating that he distanced himself from the real problematic thing that she considers problematic by calling out to her superior moral values in her map of the world, explaining that it's not really about him specifically, it is about why is there such a demand for people like him. Because obviously he is the bad guy in her viewpoint, and she wants somehow to elevate herself as the good guys, like the right person, the righteous person who has superior moral standards, whereas anybody else against her is the enemy, is evil.
I'm not complaining about
well,
him.
also,
I like
think about this. What if you want to blame rock music for things? Think about what the Bible's done. What about Heaven's Gate or Jim Jones or the Ku Klux Klan? Right. What they do in the name of Christ.
They totally defy the Bible.
Yeah, but,
the Bible says if you love God and hate your brother, you're a liar and God is not in you. Obviously, you have not read that.
No, I've read the Bible. I'm just saying what people do in the name of the Bible
is a liar and God isn't in him. So, you know, if we're going to quote the Bible, you complain that people take you out of context. Don't take the Bible out of context.
Oh, but
the majority of people
I'm not taking the Bible out of context.
Let alone do it.
He is not taking the Bible out of context. He is taking Friedrich Nietzsche out of context. That's what
But the Bible certainly has been the inspiration for an amazing amount of un-Bible-like activity.
That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And there's been more un-Bible-like activity. Look at our century. Look at the 20th century. You know, all of the mass murders and killings, and more people have been murdered outside of the name of religion than have been in the name of religion in this century. That wasn't just in the New York Times a year ago.
And that's your big claim to fame?
No, it's not.
This is where it started to sound funny to me, but let's rewind from the beginning. Here, he is using another analogy, like the devil and the church. Right here, the analogy he's using is that the Bible itself too equally as rock music, or what he says, or what he's preaching in his lyrics. Many of the things in the Bible itself have been misinterpreted and used in a pretty violent way over the years. And she's apparently not supposed anymore to let him speak, because she's interrupting him without letting him finish his point by saying that no, he doesn't know what he's talking about, and the Bible says itself, if you love God and hate your brother, then you're a liar. Probably, so this is calling back to the specifics. Of course, that is a good point in itself, but the fact of interrupting somebody like this, whereas he hasn't been disrespecting her directly, personally yet, I don't really see that either as a polite way of interacting with somebody. And I said it is funny to me because when Marilyn Manson says something first, she disagrees immediately just because this is him, or like whatever. And when the host says kind of the same thing, she agrees and says, oh yeah, absolutely. You know, when I do those breakdowns, I basically, as you can imagine, break down line by line, phrase by phrase, all the things they said to elaborate on how could I comment on that. Basically, when I follow the trail of all the things that she said from the beginning, multiple times it sounds confusing to me, because it seems like she's adapting or altering what she initially thought just to keep appearing like the smartest person in the room somehow, or whatever she's trying to do. And it's kind of changing based on the reactions of the environment, of the crowd, and of the people around her. That alone, if we take a step away from her specifically, because I don't know her specifically, so I don't want to label that woman anything, but away from her, if we just take those behaviors themselves, somebody constantly altering what they say to try to be right at all costs, and at the same time interrupting people who disagree without letting them finish what they want to say, that is a heavy, heavy, heavy narcissistic trait.
Okay, now turnabout is fair play. We've been talking about Marilyn Manson and his responsibility to society and so forth. Now, you also have a record out. And I have the lyrics to one of your songs, which I think is more irresponsible than anything on one of his records. Because
well, shoot, go ahead.
Yes, it talks about condoms. And it says, like the condoms, we sell them, but we won't tell them. It ain't safe, even if you got them. So you're telling kids it ain't...
That's not what it says.
That's what the lyrics is.
See,
don't you know they got holes?
Listen.
It says, don't you know they got holes you can't see? They might stop a baby, but it hardly stops VD.
That's right. That is correct. Condoms were never prevented. That is correct. You need to do your homework. You check the Centers for Disease Control. You check the Centers for Disease Control. When I testified before the Senate in Washington, D.C., as the Surgeon General, when I testified, it was true. Condoms were never designed to prevent people from getting anything except for pregnant. And we encourage people to use them to stop STDs. There are at least over 50 STDs, counting all the different strains that are out there. 20 of them, at least 20 of them, a condom really can't help you with. Condoms don't care.
How can it stop what stops pregnancy without stopping everything else?
Because the HIV virus is about 450 times smaller than a sperm cell. And if we magnify that, that's about the size of a football field, would be the size of one sperm cell.
So what you're telling horny teenagers is the only thing that you can do is be abstinent. And condoms don't work. So kids are not going to use condoms because they're going to listen to you and figure, well, why should we even use condoms? And that, to me, is irresponsible.
No, it's not. It's responsible because I'm telling them the truth.
No sex.
We haven't told people the truth.
You're making an irresponsible
suppression of sex throughout history that's made people so violent. I think.
No, wait a minute. You're making the irresponsible.
If you're feeling guilty about having sex,
I've never known anyone who
everybody wants to have sex. The world is created through sex.
Nice job from the host to also challenge her sometimes, because it is a nice thing to keep attacking people because you are right and everybody's wrong. Sometimes you can be attacked too, but he's doing that in a polite way, the host at least, and basically the lyrics, therefore the implied idea behind that line she used in her singing, in her songs, was condoms don't really protect against STD, so everybody should remain abstinent. She was apparently a sexual abstinence activist, and from what I read about her, she remained a virgin until her marriage. open to debate if it was the case or not. We can never really verify. The same way, I don't think we can verify, at least I can't right away, verify if indeed STD are not protected by condoms. Maybe it was not the case back then and maybe it is today. I don't have the whole science to back that up. But whatever the reason is and whatever the conclusion or the inference is, Marilyn Manson here is going back to one of his favorite patterns in conversations, the intent pattern, when he goes back to the original intent or backstory to back up his logic, his argument, his understanding of the world, saying that oppression of sex throughout history has always created violence or has always propelled violence in one way or another, which could be verified or unverified if he could proceed with his thought process, but since she's interrupting him again, maybe we will never know, at least not in this video by itself. And he's concluding with almost a meta-frame statement here by explaining that to him the world itself is created through sex. That is another viewpoint that is obviously open to debate. It doesn't mean he is right and she is wrong, it is just a viewpoint. But that is an interesting one from a linguistic perspective, because whenever you use a meta-frame pattern, it is putting you as an outside observer of the situation, and it is distancing again from the potential emotional baggage that may be lying into the conversation.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. If I don't get laid, can I sue her because of her lyrics?
No, because I don't have anything. I don't have for anything you get, but I would invite you to come out and hang with me and some of my friends sometime.
We can do a show together.
I'd like to.
I'm open-minded. I don't protest Sunday schools or anything.
I would love to have dinner and just shoot the breeze with you.
But aren't you, Nikita, aren't you hoping
And then
that
you could be with Ted Kennedy one night.
You know, but I want people to think, but I'm not trying to think I can save the world. You know, maybe the world doesn't deserve to be saved.
You're not Christ.
Maybe they only deserve to be entertained before they're all destroyed.
You can't judge who's Christ
more.
and who isn't. He may have more Christ in him than you do. You can't really say that.
You will know a tree.
And that's from Mrs. Brady.
You will know a tree.
All right, we got to take a break, everyone.
Yeah, just about perspectives when we were talking about Christ and me being not like Christ. I mean, if you look at things from a different point of view, one person could see Christ as being someone a lot like me. Someone with long hair, had a lot of fans, a lot of people that fought. He had 12 disciples. That could have been his posse, for all we know.
And people were
hung out with hookers.
But
He
being
drank.
like Christ
People
is
were
different
against
than
him.
being
And they
Christ.
killed him.
And they killed him.
But
And
being
that's what-
like Christ is different than being Christ.
No, I'm just saying have a
killed him.
And I
perspective.
said you're not Christ. Well, just like you're not Hitler,
Well, I don't
you're
wanna be
not
Christ.
Genghis Khan, and you're not anyone who's lived and is no longer here on this planet. And so, you know, if we're gonna look at what people said, I
What
didn't
about
say that you
Elvis?
weren't like Christ, but you will know. Definitely not Elvis, because you know you don't swing your hips like he does. But
You
anyway,
haven't seen me.
Yeah.
As a conclusion, when you are in a confrontation or you are being challenged or attacked by a person who takes everything so seriously, I think the best recipe here is humor, interjecting more humor into your lines, into what you say, not to the point of completely dismissing what the other person is attacking you with, but at least interjecting some humor to detach yourself, because basically with a heavily narcissistic person, and again, I'm not labeling her that because I don't know her personally, but that type of behavior is very often used by heavily narcissistic profiles, the constant interruption because their opinion is worth so much more than yours, so they don't have to let you speak because they are superior anyway. That type of behavior is heavily narcissistic, and people with such a dogmatic thinking, they usually, they're not even interested in debating with you. They don't care about your arguments. They don't care about the fact you may open their perception. They don't care about any of that. They just want to hear the sound of their own voice for hours and hours, because everything they say is so much more important than anything you can think. With those, maybe more distance yourself from the conversation, because there's not really any much point into trying to prove them wrong. Why do you even try? The minute after you have successfully eventually convinced them, they will just find somebody else to argue against because they are angry. No point in that in my opinion. Now, if you are interested into developing your communication skills in a smart way, polite, aggressive when you need to, but also smart to the point where you can distance yourself from negative people, you have a document down below in the description called The 7 Steps to Master Sleight of Mouth, from which, as I said, my model Magical Linguistics is inspired, and you will have several language patterns to use based on the situation, based on the people you are interacting with, and based on whatever is your thinking process at the moment if you are getting stuck in a conversation and don't really know what to say next. That is down below in the description. Let me know if you want more videos like this. In the meantime, keep listening to rock music and goodbye!